So we do have a question. Can we get the recording when you're done? Absolutely. So everyone who registered for this training, whether they can attend live or not, you can definitely get the recording. I'll be emailing it out once it's uploaded to my cloud. So you'll get the direct link and the password to view it. Absolutely. Okay. Well, let's get started then. Welcome to this mini training in the foundations of mindfulness. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So first of all, my intention behind sharing this is to give folks who are interested in just what is mindfulness a chance to learn a bit more about this practice, kind of sift through some of the gunk or some of the extra information that's out there and really get to the essence of what mindfulness is. We'll be talking about the definitions of mindfulness, what that can mean in our daily lives, and also going through some of the foundational practices today. And first of all, I see a photo's not coming up. That's okay. First of all, I want to introduce myself. My name is Alexa Owen. I am a meditation instructor and contemplative educator, and I'm dedicated to supporting people in flourishing in their intra and interpersonal relationships. So how they relate with themselves and how they relate with others. A lot of my studies and practices, especially in the past 4 years, are rooted in Tibetan Buddhism or Buddhist frameworks of mind. But I also, before that, have a long history of study in yoga therapy. I worked as a yoga therapist. I'm really interested in somatic approaches to health and well-being. And right now, I'm also working as a researcher and aspiring psychotherapist. As I speak now, I'm about halfway through my clinical social work master's program, and I'll be graduating from that later in 2024. So first off, what actually is mindfulness? There are a lot of ways to approach this topic, and let's see. Oh, I saw something pop up in the chat. I'll get back to you later on that about my second year placement. What actually is mindfulness? So a lot of different definitions. It can be kind of easy to get muddled up in like what it is, how we practice it. So I want to start with the basics. Mindfulness can mean a lot of things, and that's okay. As a general rule, we can understand it as a non-judgmental awareness of one's present moment experience. And this awareness has the power to give us insight into our thoughts, stories, and lives. And by stories, I mean the stories, the narratives, that the beliefs even that we might be holding in our minds that sort of disrupt our, perceptions of what's going on in the world, or our perceptions of ourselves, kind of cloud over our ability to see and be with ourselves in a really clear way. Importantly, I want to focus on one key word in this definition: non-judgmental. This is probably the sort of essence of mindfulness practice, and kind of doing it in a way that actually supports our health and well-being and growth. It's about being with our experience without jumping to criticism, without jumping to self-doubt, without jumping to any sort of default patterning around being unkind to ourselves when our mind wanders, or when we have a certain emotion or thought come into our experience, when we're having a tough time in our lives. So whenever I teach mindfulness, I'm always really emphasizing this non-judgmental aspect. And it's an aspiration, right? It's not that if we have judgment come in, we're doing it wrong, or the practice is going to cause harm. It's a process, it's a practice, but keeping in mind that the way that we are with ourselves, ultimately we want it to be in a non-judgmental way, is quite important for the longevity of this practice, and sort of, embodying the results that we have the potential to embody. How does mindfulness affect quality of life? So this is also a big question, and one that I think is worth addressing, because it's one thing to start to establish a mindfulness practice, but it's like, why do we want to do that? Maybe it calms down our mind and that's great, or reduces stress and that's great. But there are other opportunities within living a mindful life that I'm going to address in the next couple slides. So mindfulness, it leads to a sense of presence and fulfillment. Being completely present with our experience, it allows us to actually inhabit our lives in a really full way. Even if that experience might be challenging, even if the emotions feel heavy, or the external situation in our life, maybe in work, maybe with family or other relationships or in the community, feels really challenging, being fully present with it allows us to experience what it is to fully inhabit our lives, to fully live within how we are in the world. And the quality of our attention plays a major role in sense of fulfillment. And by this, I mean, the more we're able to direct and have agency over our attention, what we pay attention to in our minds and lives, the more of a sense of fulfillment we'll have. An example that I often give is like eating food. So enjoying the actual sensation of food, or the pleasure of how it tastes. Another sort of pleasurable experience, even if I decide I want to watch a show on Netflix just to have a break or decompress, can I fully just drop in and enjoy the full experience of that show? Or am I also like on my phone or checking emails or Googling other things about something I'm thinking about in the future? How much can I really attend to what I'm doing? And of course, these are, smaller examples, but you can imagine how this plays a role in the bigger things in our lives too, our connections with our loved ones, the meaningfulness of our work. If there's a creative outlet that you have, like being fully immersed and present in what we're doing by really attending to it and placing our attention there, helps us to feel like we live life more fully. And then another effect of that, another benefit, is this decreased sort of reaction or habit of consistently looking for the next best thing, or like looking outside of ourselves for something that'll bring even more sensation or more fulfillment. Sometimes it really is just the quality of our attention that we need to work with, and mindfulness helps us do this. We can support ourselves in inhabiting our lives by threading mindfulness also through our days. And I'll be talking about just some practical examples of how to do this. Here's another definition of mindfulness that I wanted to share before going there. This is from Nalanda Institute for Contemplative Science, where I've studied for the past several years and am now on meditation faculty there. We see mindfulness not as a passive technique of self-reflection, but as an active relational process of awakening to the reality of our lives, our relationships, and the world around us. The ultimate aim of mindfulness practice is not just to be mindful, but to use our greater awareness to develop the greater insight and ethical responsibility that empower us to change our lives, our relationships, and our world for the better. So obviously, this is a much more dense, kind of packed definition of mindfulness, but I appreciate it because it's holistic. And I love the first part especially, how it points to mindfulness as an active relational process of awakening to the reality of our lives. It's not something that's passive. It's really active. It's being able to take in what's really actually happening in our present moment experience and then responding with full agency, responding skillfully, so that moment to moment, we're really crafting the lives that we want. And I also lastly appreciate this description of mindfulness because it points to the wider sort of community benefits of doing a practice like this. It can help us engage with community and in the world in a more ethical way, whatever that means for us. And also the quality of our mindfulness must be considered. So mindfulness in the previous slide, we pointed out to how it's relational, it's active, it's not this passive, just kind of sitting, waiting, seeing what happens. But also mindfulness is not, it's not cold, it's not distant, it's not like this lifeless neutrality that we have to embody. It has a quality of warmth, it has a quality of care, of wisdom. So even the practice, which we'll do in a little bit, of like sitting or lying down, whatever posture you choose, and just watching and just witnessing the sensation of our breathing, if we do that with a quality of care and warmth, we're really engaging in a mindfulness practice that has the power to transform how we are with ourselves, and then by extension, how we are with the people in our lives and our lives as a whole. So there's a warmth to it. There's an engagement. There's a sense of care. And I know some of these things can feel or sound maybe a little bit abstract, but that's why we'll be doing a couple of practices today. So you can just start to kind of experiment with it on your own as well. So before we get into mindfulness in daily life, I just want to talk about how mindfulness changes the brain. And yeah, for this, I like to bring in this science piece around neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity being the structural and functional sort of adaptability and ability to change for the brain. So it's how our brain changes through internal experiences like thoughts and things, but also external experiences and our environment. So on a daily basis, even how we engage with the world, what we experience, but also what we think, what's going on inside our minds, can actually change the structure and function of the brain. And I know some of this got cut off, but I'm going to go through it in the graphic here. So in mindfulness practice, where we place our attention determines which networks become stronger. For example, if we are attending to a thought pattern that has more is more sort of positively valenced, like we feel hopeful, we feel compassionate, we feel like we have choice and agency over our lives. When we put our attention there and think thoughts aligned in that space, neural networks that are supporting the function of that thinking start to come online and become stronger and stronger. Whereas those networks that maybe are related to the opposite sort of thinking, like having doubts or feeling hopeless, there can be sort of, feelings of depression coming up and thoughts around that as an example. Those will get weaker if we like switch our thinking to another pathway. This is where if you're a psychotherapist or in training to become a psychotherapist, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is a good example of this. We experience increased access to mental flexibility and creativity. It's almost like we open up the spaces of potential in our minds and brains that kind of lie dormant when we're wrapped up in a stress cycle or feeling dysregulated. By bringing mindfulness to our present moment experience, we can sort of calm things down, which then opens up spaces to be more flexible in our thinking. Decreased amygdala activity. The amygdala wasn't sort of cut off here. You can see it. It's that little teeny part in the midbrain that tends to get really active when we experience things like fear. So in mindfulness practice, research has shown that, yeah, mindfulness practitioners have less activity in that area of the brain, in the amygdala, which correlates with decreased activity in sort of fear or the stress response. So really good for our health in that way. Also increased connections to the frontal lobes. The frontal lobes are up here. This, I think, said prefrontal cortex, but that's basically the CEO of the brain. So it's the part of the brain that is responsible for executive functioning. It's the newest part of the brain. So it has sort of those higher thinking capacities. And in mindfulness practice, it's been shown that the frontal lobes have more communication with the rest of the brain. And this kind of leads us to the last point, which is an increased harmony and communication among all levels of the brain. And I love this word harmony. It's just like things are working in sync. So if you're going to take anything away from this slide, know that mindfulness practice doesn't only affect how our minds work, it can actually change the structure and function of our brains. And where we place our attention has a huge impact on how our brains and minds are shaped. Okay, so we'll move on to section 2 now, mindfulness in daily life. And then I think I have a slide that has us do our first practice, so we'll get a little bit of a break. How can we integrate mindfulness into daily life? So here are just some tips that I use and I wanted to share because they feel grounding and practical. We can replace multitasking with single tasking. This is huge. And this also trains our attention to kind of gather itself up and focus on one thing without having to split it off between a bunch of different things. I realize this isn't always possible as a current full-time graduate student who also has her own business and also attends to, daily things related to family and friends and relationships and community and all of this. There's a lot going on. But that said, when we take a mindful approach to doing what we're doing, we can actually kind of be more, not only just be more generative and efficient in what we're doing, but embody it fully. So again, I'm bringing in this sort of ways to fully inhabit our lives. And this could start small. It could start, I always come back to food. It could start with like eating a meal without watching something or checking our phones. It could mean going on a 10-minute walk and just experiencing the environment around us. It could be if we are on our computers all day and working and have, the 18 things on our to-do list, really just engaging in one thing at a time and like completing it before moving to the next thing. Some examples of single tasking versus multitasking. Second, we can notice thought streams and make a choice about how to respond. And we'll do this more in the practice, but if we notice ourselves drifting off into sort of future tripping or thinking of the past or doing things with our minds that don't feel like they're supporting us in the moment. Not that there's anything wrong with daydreaming or things like this. There's a really creative element to it. But if you feel like it's not really supporting you, just noticing when you drift away. And the moment that you notice and are aware of it and kind of bring your attention back to what you are doing, it's like doing a push-up for the mind, we say. So we don't have to feel badly about thoughts drifting or hopping on a thought train, et cetera, et cetera. We can just realize that, this is me strengthening my power of attention and I get to have choice in what I think about. This comes with emotions too. So this third point, sense when strong emotions or reactions are arising in the body. You don't have to do anything with them. You don't have to try to pacify them or get rid of them. But noticing sensation more brings in the somatic element of mindfulness, which is super, super important, because oftentimes the first clue to how we're reacting in a moment is the sensation in the body. And this can feel more or less accessible to different people, but we'll have a chance to practice it coming up pretty soon. I love this fourth point: pause or take a breath before responding in relational context. So this can be with family members, with friends, if you have a partner or partners. If something happens that you feel kind of sets you off or triggers you, just pausing and taking a breath or taking a few breaths is a way to be mindful in that moment and notice what you're feeling and give yourself a chance to feel what you're feeling before reacting sort of unconsciously. And this pause over time can get longer and longer, or just kind of fuller and fuller and feel more real, to a point where sometimes we kind of dissolve that automatic reactivity that we have, that sort of feeling like we want to lash out or say something that we might later regret out of anger or hurt. So this is really, really helpful in relationship. And then finally, let yourself derive joy from simple pleasures. I think sometimes mindfulness in sort of the mainstream, a lot of what's talked about is like stress reduction and being mindful of the ways that you can get stirred up in your thoughts and things like this. But I also like to bring attention to the fact that mindfulness can let us fully enjoy moments of pleasure and pleasantness more than how we might feel without the mindfulness practice. So those things that you already have in your days that you derive a little bit of pleasure from, maybe it's the feeling of being tired at night and just like getting into bed. Maybe it's the first sort of experience of sunlight in the morning. Maybe it's a scent or music that you enjoy. I invite you to really drop into enjoying them more. Like, this is mindfulness too. Yeah, being able to inhabit the joy and the pleasantness and pleasure in our lives. The body is built to live in the present. Training the mind to rest in the present moment dissolves the friction between past, present, and future dwelling. This is something I was speaking about with a friend of mine just last month, actually, how when we're dwelling so much in the future, like maybe about worries or anxieties about things, or dwelling in the past, maybe kind of being critical towards ourselves for making certain choices, etc., the body doesn't really know what to do with it, because the body and the nervous system live in the present moment. So even just by residing more in the present on a day-to-day basis, just a little bit at a time, it helps to reduce that like friction between body and mind. There's less confusion in life. There's more clarity. So this is a subtler effect of mindfulness in daily life. Okay. Great. We're doing well on time. Let's take a few moments to rest in the breathing body. I know I've done some talking, and so our minds are kind of like awake and alert. But let's just take a short break. I'm going to teach you one of the two foundational practices of mindfulness in the next few minutes. So I think this will be maybe a 5 to 7 minutes. So just take a posture that feels comfortable for you. You might remain seated, you might be lying down. If you feel like you need to just stretch a bit, go ahead and do that. You're also welcome to do this practice standing up. So just finding a posture that feels kind of comfortable, but one in which you're not likely to fall asleep. And I'll just let you know ahead of time, I often close my eyes during practice. So you'll see my eyelids kind of close in the next few moments on the video here. But you're welcome to do what feels good for you. You can close your eyes. You can allow a soft gaze to rest in front of you. But just starting to settle in to this moment. Allowing your eyelids to gently close if that feels good. Otherwise, just letting a soft gaze rest in front of you. And you might notice those contact points between yourself, your body, and whatever surface is rising up to support you in this moment, perhaps supporting you from the bottom, maybe at the back as well. It might be at the bottoms of the feet or the sits bones or the back. Just seeing if you can become aware of where the surface beneath you is rising up to support you. And taking a moment now to also soften any points of tension you become aware of in your body. This oftentimes can be the area of the neck or shoulders, the jaw, that space between the eyebrows. So, if it's possible, just allowing some softness to come to those spaces, some warmth to kind of melt away some of the tension. And then coming to rest in your breathing body itself. So, by that, I mean starting to notice the rise of the inhale and the falling away of the exhale. Just kind of tracking the rhythm of your breathing. There's no need to change or adjust anything. There's no need to perform. We're just being with our breath as it is in this moment. If thoughts come, just recognizing that's a really typical thing for a mind to do, to have thoughts, so it's completely okay. But when you do notice if that's happening, just allowing yourself to make that choice between keeping your attention on the thought that kind of pulled at you, or just gathering up your attention once again and resting it on the rise and fall of your inhales and exhales, the sensation of breathing in your body. Allowing yourself to rest your attention, perhaps at those spaces where you feel the sensation of breathing the most. So it could be at the tip of or inside the nostrils, maybe the back of the throat. Could simply be the rise and fall of the chest or the belly. Resting, relaxing into the breathing body. Allowing the quality of your attention to be infused with a bit of warmth, a bit of gentleness, a bit of care. We'll be here just less than a minute more, so continuing as you are. Allowing yourself to maybe even enjoy and savor this experience of resting with the breathing body, resting in the sensation of breathing. And then taking just a few more breaths here, allowing yourself to start to bring this practice to a close. And softening your focus on the breath and kind of zooming out once again to feeling the body as a whole, sensing where there's support of the surface beneath you or behind you. An awareness of the space, the room around you, maybe sounds, temperature of the room, just gently bringing yourself back to awareness of the space. And then as you feel ready, if the eyes were closed, opening the eyes and coming back to our shared space. Good. If anyone has questions or reflections, you're welcome to type them in the chat or just go ahead and unmute. We'll just take, a minute or two here. If you want to share, have any questions about what we just did. This is mindfulness of the breathing body, I call it. So we'll keep going and we'll have time for questions as well at the end a little bit later. And please do, we have about 25 minutes left. So please do take care of yourself if you need to get a sip of water, tea, or coffee, or stretch a little bit. Do what you need to do. So we'll move into sort of the more of the foundations and mechanisms of practice. We're coming into our third section here. What exactly are the stages of mindfulness? So what kind of progression are we looking at in our mindfulness practice? Classically, mindfulness includes 4 stages. Body mindfulness, which is essentially awareness of the breathing body. This is the practice we just did. Mindful sensitivity, which is awareness of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral sensation. So getting a little bit more detailed in like what we're observing and specific in that. These 2 practices, we did one, we're going to do the other in another 10 minutes, 15 minutes for our class today. We'll be doing mindful sensitivity together. These are like 2 of the real strong foundations of a mindfulness practice in terms of really calming the mind down and regulating the nervous system, coming into relationship with how our mind works and what it does. I underline them because they're the two that we're going over today. And also these 4 stages, these are the ones that we go over in more depth. We basically spend a week on each of them in the compassion-based resilience training course, which I'm also teaching coming up toward the end of May. We spend about a week on each of these. So the first 2 that are underlined we're doing today, they're more mainstream in terms of the mindfulness practices that are offered sort of widely out there today. And then the second 2 are sort of lesser talked about, a bit more subtle. Mindful awareness, that open, clarifying awareness of your present experience. So this is more about the question of, well, what happens when you finally do regulate yourself to be able to drop into the space of the mind? Like, what then? What do we use our mindfulness for? And so once we kind of establish the calm and the grounding and those skill sets in the first 2 stages, we can move to mindful awareness, which is essentially noticing the inherent quality of mind, which is spacious, which is open, which is clarifying. And from here, we dive into mindful insight, which is bringing skillful response to all phenomena arising in our present moment experience. And if these sound kind of abstract, that's okay. They are. Sometimes it can be harder to put into words and experience, but we attempt to do so in this training and in the other trainings that I offer. And again, this 4th step brings into question, what do we do when we experience the calm, open, spacious grounding of the clarity of our minds? What do we then do with that? And when we get into those spaces of mindful awareness, we're able to cultivate mindful insight more about the sort of the stories that we might have about ourselves, unhelpful beliefs or unskillful speech or actions that we have in our lives, habits and such. We come to a space where we can really look at those and understand them. And if we feel like we want to, then take steps toward changing them, toward shifting them, both in our practice and in our lives. But I would say about 90% of mindfulness, it seems like it's sort of taught in those first 2 steps. And then what I love about going deeper is that we then get to dive into this question of, okay, like we cultivated this space, we put in the work. What do we want to do with it now? So I'll go over the first 2 in a little more depth. Body mindfulness means bringing non-reactive, unbiased awareness to any and all present moment experience of our living, breathing body. Benefits are calming the mind, training attention, and just building a relationship with ourselves. Starting with the body, this is what I mean when I say the word somatic. When we work with the body, it's like we have this field of sort of this field or space to like experiment and play and learn about how we respond and react to different things going on. And the reason that breath is often used in mindfulness practice as the object of attention, one of them, is that the breath is always happening in the present moment, no matter what. So when we focus our attention on the breath and on the breathing body, we're inviting ourselves to really fully inhabit the present moment and in a non-judgmental, unbiased, non-reactive way at that. Mindful sensitivity. So this is the second step from a couple of slides ago. It means bringing non-reactive, unbiased awareness to any and all of our pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral sensitivity to present moment experience. So essentially, we're not only noticing oh, there's sensation. Oh, that's the breath. Oh, that's a pain in my knee. Or, oh, that feels good, the warmth of the blanket on my back. We're noticing if it's valenced as sort of, oh, that's a pleasant experience, that's unpleasant, or that's kind of neutral. That's usually the stuff we don't even notice. And so by learning more about sort of what we experience in this framework and then how we react to it, we can start to catch ourselves in how we create more suffering for ourselves by pushing away unpleasantness, clinging or grasping to pleasantness, or just tuning out of and checking out of the neutral. I love this practice. I teach it anytime that I get a chance. And I love it because, moving down to the benefits here, it gives us an awareness of the unconscious push-pull of our reactivity. And this plays out so much in daily life. It's like when someone says something and we're like, oh, I don't like that, I don't like you, but it's happening beneath the radar. Or when we get to maybe take a break from our work and like take a nice walk outside, and it's beautiful and like so pleasant and the sunlight is warm, and we come into that space of just like craving it, just wanting more and wanting it to not end, and taking ourselves into a future moment then of when it will end, and kind of causing ourselves more suffering by attaching to it really strongly and clinging to it. And then also in the neutral space, this is just such a transformative practice for me. Noticing all the things in my awareness that typically fly under the radar because they don't seem directly linked to my survival or thriving. They're not super unpleasant or super pleasant. When I begin to notice that whole gradient of my experience, it creates opportunities to then fully experience my moment to moment life. It brings more opportunities for connections with people. It brings more opportunities for finding joy in small moments when typically the mind kind of filters so much stuff out. And it does that because we live in a world where there's a lot of information overload, and a lot of that information can be painful and harmful and difficult to grapple with. But I invite us to experience more of the neutral, and we'll do this through our practice, to be open to more of the joy, more of the pleasantness. And just getting to the second point of benefits, it's training our agency in how we respond to sensation, thoughts, emotions, and people. So again, it brings in choice. It brings in agency. Oh, I notice that I'm clinging to this experience of pleasantness. What would it be like to just drop in and enjoy it without thinking about wanting more or how it will end? Just releasing ourselves from that sort of second layer of agitation or tension that we often bring in by pushing something away or clinging to it, or just kind of tuning out with the neutral. Mindfulness practice, it can give us the tools to accept, and then if needed, change the ways we embody our minds and lives. I think this feels like a way to kind of sum up a lot of what I've talked about so far in this class. So before we move into our last practice, I want to open it up again to questions, and then we'll do the mindful sensitivity practice, and then we'll close. If there are any questions or reflections, you're welcome to unmute or type in the chat. And of course, if things come up later, then you can always reach out to me or just ask after our practice. But if anything pressing feels like it's coming up now. someone asked about my second year placement for my social work program. I will be working in a psychotherapy clinic here in Boulder, Colorado, where I'm based now. Okay, well, let's move into our practice then. This will be maybe 8 to 10 minutes. So finding a comfortable position, just like before, and we'll move into some mindful sensitivity. Good. So finding, again, your comfortable posture. I'm going to allow my eyelids to just softly close. And perhaps coming to rest again in your breathing body, just reminding yourself of, our earlier practice. Feeling the support of the space around you, the support of this container that we've created together. And if any of this practice that I'm about to share feels abstract or challenging, I just want to preface that with that's okay. It takes time for our minds to sort of get familiar with different ways of thinking and being. So just give yourself a little bit of grace, a little bit of time, and let the sort of guidance and sound of my voice just, invite you to experience whatever level of this practice you're at today. So becoming aware of your body as a whole, the breathing body, allowing the breath to be in its organic rhythm. I invite you to first bring your awareness toward any sensation or feeling tone that feels a bit unpleasant. So, could be like a physical pain or sensation, maybe a discomfort around part of the position you're in. Could be subtler, like a mental or emotional tension. But typically, we kind of push these out of our awareness in daily life. So, this is just a safe container to invite awareness of anything unpleasant. Could even be like a feeling of coolness where you'd rather feel warmth, or the opposite, feeling too warm where you'd rather feel cool. These are some examples. I also invite you to notice if you had a reaction or experience a reaction toward this unpleasantness. Perhaps it's a resistance to being aware of it. Perhaps it's a wanting it to be different or change or go away. So you have choice here. Just witnessing, being mindful of, aware of any sensation or feeling tone of unpleasantness. And if you'd like, noticing your reaction toward that and just witnessing that as well. Seeing what that opens up, if there's an opportunity for more ease with how you are. And experiencing, witnessing unpleasant sensation. and you soften towards it. And then gently kind of zooming out, becoming aware once more of the whole of the body, softening your focus on unpleasantness. And now redirecting your attention, becoming aware of any sort of pleasant sensation or feeling tone. And sometimes this can be more challenging to be aware of. So if you're experiencing that, be kind with yourself. You might notice the pleasantness of being supported by the earth, the ground, or your seat. Pleasantness of warmth or coolness. Maybe a sense of relaxation, just allowing pleasant sensation or feeling tone to be in your awareness. And then optionally noticing as well if there's any sort of reaction to it, like a wanting to stay in it, wanting more, wanting it to not end. Maybe it's just having this space for the mind to rest. Noticing if there's a reaction toward that, a clinging or attachment. A typical reaction for the mind to have, but just opening to what it might be like to be with the reactivity or the sensation without needing it to last forever or wanting more. Just noticing, being witness to sensation and the reaction of pleasantness. And then softening your focus on the pleasantness, coming back to the body as a whole to move into the final stage of this practice. I invite you to just become aware of the neutral. So, those spaces, those feelings that are typically not in our awareness. And there's sometimes a reaction to kind of tune out or numb it out. It might be spaces on the physical body you're not typically aware of, like the armpits or the tops of the legs, the bottoms of the feet, the ears, spaces like this. It might be just the sort of energetic sensations of being in your body, sorts of tingling or sensation of breathing, things like this. And also optionally noticing if your mind tends to kind of start to drift off, thinking about other things, if it deems the neutral unimportant, which is a typical kind of reaction. What might it be like to be with the neutral, to be with that whole gradient in between? to continue to rest your attention on sensation. And then for the last few moments of this practice, I invite you to welcome in the whole range of radiant sensations. So unpleasant, pleasant, all the neutral, everything in between. Just resting in your breathing body, awareness of sensation. Opening to a sense of aliveness in this moment. And then as you feel ready, kind of sensing again the space around you and the supports beneath you or behind you. Sealing your practice if it feels good with a gesture, sometimes placing a hand at heart center or palms together at the heart or forehead can feel nice. And then as you're ready, coming back to our shared space. Good. So that's our training for today. As I did mention in the beginning, yes, you will have access to the recording. I'll send a follow-up email. And I feel like I want to offer sort of this training, like a mini training next week on compassion, because that's also a pillar of sort of contemplative practice and living and well-being. Thank you. I'm just getting some private messages. So I think same time, I'll do it 12 noon Eastern time next Wednesday. And if you want to make sure that you're aware of that, I will type in the chat. Let's see. This is my website, so you can either just send me an email to get signed up for updates on that, or you can sign up for the newsletter. It's kind of at the bottom of the homepage, either one. But yeah, I think I'm going to do that as well because it feels good. Any last questions, comments? No? Okay. Great. Well, I really enjoyed practicing with you all today. Thanks for attending live. For those on the recording, I'm glad that you got to see this. And my website, oh, I can actually just share it. One moment. All my info, it's just my name.com, but sometimes it's nice to see it. So here we are. Yeah, it's just my name, alexaowen.com. You can always just email me through my website or send me a separate email. And I hope to see you all again soon. Bye.
Thank you.